So to the background of Nelly Furtado, Say It Right, this is what's been running through my head through the course of what's led up to this broadcast. D sharp, G sharp, and 5 C sharp aren't bad either. So, greetings, my name is Michael Miller. This is a Michael Miller trademark training video out to you because you're watching. Thank you and welcome. It's meant for Michael Miller Pilates licensed affiliates, the Cornu Core, my patrons, and one of my patrons showed up on Facebook, and that felt good. And hopefully what they're patronizing is, that's such a tough word, but that's the word I think it's meant as. Anybody interested in surviving and thriving as a Pilates instructor, this broadcast is also meant for. There's 3 titles today. One is Throughout History, the other is Discerning a Difference, and the third is Understanding the Advantage. Okay? And because of all of the color in the last video of the pegs arranged in order and at random, and the point that makes about Michael Miller Pilates being a reflection of what is ideal within Joe's original work, spoiled at giving you a visual, I have this to, I don't have a home for it yet, a place to hang it, that means, in my current digs. So if I bring it way back here and hold it up, and I usually try to make a twist of it from the bottom. Can you see that? I'm twisting it from the bottom. So there I am as a Pilates instructor, applying tension or inserting tension into a situation where there's all these vertical bars, horizontal bars, connected by a vertical width of strap. It's not just a string, it's a strap. I'm getting in the way of it with my wrist. Okay, so why does it do that? I don't know. It's the physics of it. But I can point to the physics and appreciate how it behaves in order to appreciate the rotational axes. I claim to identify as endpoints of tension within the body connected by Cornu tension because it's oppositional in the way it creates the tension. One direction of rotation goes opposite the other, and this goes opposite this. All the way out the body to the metatarsals, not the tips of the toes, but the metatarsals as an endpoint of tension. And even if you like to say ball of foot, and don't like the clinical expression metatarsals, in one word it represents exactly the location that MMP points to, where when you try to translate the ball of the foot into French, say, it's way too much effort. Metatarsals. So number 1 is throughout history. Throughout history, humanity has abolished the old and installed the new, no matter what it is. You could talk about locations, you could talk about reasons for celebrations. So a good Pilates instructor recognizes the Pilates culture that exists within their time, whatever that time is. And uses to an advantage how big money or concerted effort or a lot of smart people will go after maximizing the benefit from the involvement in the activity. Sadly, to the point where money talks, and that's the only thing that matters. So number 2, discerning a difference. You know, like, can you tell the difference between two things? I'm really jazzed because there's a big party planned for the day after my convention, to which they have attributed a countdown for when their party starts, Saturday evening. And so what I would want to point out to you as someone interested in Pilates is that from within the MMP point of view, the reason for the last 13 years there's been a convention at the solstice at Lost Gulch Overlook, just west of Boulder, has been to acknowledge the role of observing in surviving. And I connect that to the Inca Empire at Machu Picchu, observing and being able to discern the change in the solstice, because it's not subjective at all, and it's been timed out into years ahead, down to the second or better, right, as to when these changes happen in the planets that are moving. So the last time with all the colored pegs, I'm going to lose my train of thought, but these are arranged this way. Why? Because it's the color of the rainbow, and that's not a subjective thing, that's the way it happens. It's a physics thing. And so you can acknowledge that things are physics things without necessarily knowing why or how it's so, but acknowledge that, meaning that it is. That the rainbow does come out in this particular order. So as a Pilates instructor, recognizing the role of sequentiality in what you're delivering, either literally in the exercises in the sequence of the mat, or from an ideal perspective of progressive patterns of movement, if not the whole definition of MMP, which you know I think as uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. That's just one definition out of thousands of points of view. This point of view attributes survival to observing what's actually going on out there in terms of the event of solstice. Because in Machu Picchu, that was an indication of when to plant crops that an entire civilization relied upon. Right? In knowing that, I hope, you know that the MMP convention has a countdown to that moment of when solstice occurs. Because that's what's observable. That's what you can sense in that you see a change. I think of shadows passing over rocks. But however you measure it, it's observable. And in the observing comes the surviving. And so that's why MMP celebrates that time because of its connection to Pilates being the Pilates method being about surviving. It's a reaction. It's a reaction. It's a reaction to the reality that we find ourselves in, that we hope gives us the best chance of surviving with whatever comes up. Joseph Pilates was a survivor. That's my opinion. His method is a survival method. That's my opinion. His method is I'm jazzed that there's going to be this big party that I hope to go to that has a countdown to it, because it's different than one that I'm tied to and where I plan on being for the real solstice, for that real moment in time. And it's nice knowing that the start of the party isn't until the next day, at a decent hour. So, one countdown is recognizing the fact and the physics and the universe that we're in, and what we're in movement about, that celestial dance as a moment in time where it's occurring. 9:54 Rocky Mountain time, June 21st. The next day is a party. There's a countdown for that. And as a Pilates instructor, being aware of value and a time element of value, then the amount of time before the actual moment and when the party starts is like the difference between the fact and the fun. Okay? Which is great. Which is great. The difference between those two times, one can be arbitrary, and the other, or convenient, or just sensible, but the other is a point in time, literally, in space, with bodies in movement. So it's about movement. So maybe that's what I'll have to focus on. It's about movement. And so, in understanding that the MMP point of view is about observing the actual moment that's observable, or trying to, paying homage to that moment, because of its connection to survival, And in the observing, that it's observable, in the observing, bring you into more participation of being, thinking, and observing as a way to celebrate Joe's gift, the experience. If you're at the convention, not the convention, the Momentum Fest, and it's all kinds of modalities. See, and there's another thing. MMP is a point of view of Pilates, just Pilates. And because the point of view says that Pilates has an ideal within it, and that defines itself. And from the MMP point of view, again, that it's defining in not only how it makes sense in a thinking realm, but in a sensational realm. There's an experience to be had when one goes diving into their complete coordination of their body, mind, and spirit. So understanding the advantage is number 3. And the advantage I started out with is in terms of knowing information before others do, let alone witnessing it, but just knowing that, yes, the solstice is actually at 9:54 a.m. on June 21st. And if you set your phone and make an announcement, you'll at least know when that is. And because that happens on such a broad network, your phone thing, that it will be a cue that I would want you to take as exhaling into the expiration of the solstice and instinctually triggering inspiration. So you wait in the gap. The phone goes off, and as you're exhaling, you turn your phone off. If you can't, just do it for one beat. And in that exhalation, recognize that your inhalation is taking you along a new path, an old path, well worn, but different in character. It's a science thing. It's a physics thing. I don't know. So one advantage is in actually knowing that in the case of MMP and the countdown in MMP is to the fact of the happening, and the other is a countdown to when the party starts. Just knowing the difference between those two, let alone however you spend your time between those two, is the amount of time that knowing about puts you in the knowing rather than unaware. Two different countdowns, one to the fact and the other to the party. How great is that? And I'm not hosting the party. So my closing notes are: don't be naive, don't be distracted, know what you know, and maybe what you know or a point of view that you're aware of is more to your detriment than your advantage, but that's only if you admit what you know. my view is I guess I'm at the end of my broadcast because I'm talking about two and two and knowing the difference in value, and that's the other subtle point I was going to try to make about, I talk about how big money can't really go to the point of the matter without leaving all of those subscribers behind. So in casting the net as wide as you can, it's not to an advantage to acknowledge it specifically as something of its own until you couldn't really get away from it because everybody else knew, and not acknowledging it left you so I just am really tickled that all the time in promoting for the last 13 years at least, but documented for sure, 13 years, it's a celebration of CT and MMP, or Michael Miller-Pilates, but really the two things are about CT and MMP. And now and I used to worry about what people would do other than come to witness the MMP convention, be part of that convention. Right? And now it's like, wow, there's a whole weekend, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, just a few miles away. It's up in the mountains. It requires you have your faculties with you if you come out onto the rock, but you can drive up and park and never get out of your car. You can get out and do a $5 thing to the park and read all the signs and see what all the mountains are named and know where you were when. Lost Gulch Overlook at the solstice. So I'm worried that I'm not going to be the only one there this year. But with luck, we'll see. We'll see. Don't be naive. Don't be naive. See, okay, so because live can't live forever, better to see behind the curtain and read between the lines as much as you can while you can, to evaluate points of view or value. View and value, they rhyme. You know what this means? conventional, contemporary, there's another C word in there, aristocracy, the way the culture exists now, without viewing it as through a theory that there's an ideal that exists within. See, that's what makes it transcendent. That's what takes it beyond the way things currently are now. And there may be others that come along and say, oh no, sure it's an idea, but this is the idea more clearly. You know, you're arguing about illumination and what's clearer than not, rather than the fact that there is illumination. There is light. It's really such a simple thing, but I don't think that big money's interest is in doing anything other than making big money. So the most important thing about big money is the most important thing, and so making money is the most important thing. And there's a lot of money to be made off of it without it being defined or restricted to what it really is, before it has to be, or comes to the point where you want to acknowledge that it is what it is. That's timing, right? So in that sense, the MMP convention has a countdown to the moment, at a place, for the last 13 years, for a reason. And I'm sad, but I'm happy that the two people that are the oldest, most, started teaching Pilates the earliest in the area. As far as I go, I have to go Ferentinos, that's a guy's name, because it was he that brought Stefan to the studio, and Stefan took on Deborah as a teacher training, and I became a teacher more through Ferentinos than Deborah, but that was the order and timing. See, timing. When did you show up? Who are you? And where do you come from? That's out of Tolkien. So know what you know. Don't be naive. And what is that you know? Well, you know that there's one point of view that looks at Pilates in an ideal way. And in the pursuit of the ideal comes an experience that this point of view attributes to Joe's definition. See? Know where it comes from, know what it's based on, and then whatever you make of it is, of course, up to you and your own creativity. But knowing that you can get to such clarity from just Joe's definition, promise, and sequence, and have the gift of giving a person the experience of oppositional rotation between axes, and then if they're interested, one point of view out of a lot that makes an attempt at a reasoned explanation for what makes Pilates what it is. And that definition of that point of view is uniform eccentric loading flowing through progressive patterns of movement. Memorize that, and that's the fifth thing that I want you to know in order to be a presenter. go out and make money just by looking at your phone and reading off those 5 things. And then if you have anything to add to it, that's what makes it special to you. If you leave out those 5 things, people that have already heard it will be disappointed that you at least didn't cover them. So don't cut off the income stream that can do nothing but grow for you. Insofar as you can say, well, I can explain CT and MMP, and it's no big deal, it's just one point of view of Pilates, well, and then a point of view of biomechanics that isn't in the books yet. And so if whatever you want to make of Pilates has nothing to do with what Pilates is, that's human nature. But the whole point of the broadcast is to survive as a Pilates instructor, as though that can be understood as to what that is. And within that particular understanding of what it means to be a Pilates instructor, have a sense of definition of who you are as one, right? What your target is and how to hit it. And so I never did finish talking about that very enthusiastic, capable individual that wanted to know how to teach. They wanted everything about Pilates, and so they spent some time with me. They came to see me, spent some time with me, and where before they were at the end of a line of spend your dues and just do this stuff, the situation came out that she was teaching because she had something to teach and the confidence to do it with. Now, whether or not you're any good and whether or not you don't risk other people, have insurance. You hear me say that? Have insurance. Have them sign a waiver. Have it be tough, and it won't matter in court in a way, because if you're negligent, no matter what they signed on the way in, you still get judged by the court. So when in doubt, leave it out. That's where that comes from. So when it comes to comparing things or making a distinction, when I say know what you know, right? Hopefully from the MMP point of view, you have a view of Pilates as an ideal that you can feel. And to me, I would encourage you not to be distracted by thinking as though thinking is the realm at which there is resolution. Because that can't be the case, in my opinion, as a Pilates instructor, because you're there to coordinate the capacities of being, thinking, and observing. To the extent that observing is a necessary component of what one is trying to coordinate, thinking can never take all the air out of the room where there is no acknowledgement of whatever observing is, that thinking isn't. Because thinking wants to believe that whatever the observing is happening within the thinking. To me, it's simple to think of the prefrontal cortex is where all the thinking happens, and the amygdala hippocampal areas is where all the observing is going on, because that's feeding information to the thinking that's necessary to coordinate in the body, in the world that it's in. Right? Know what you know. Don't be distracted. And MMP is about biology accomplishing the physics. The physics is that the biology moves through space. It tries to survive in a jungle of gravity. And that's why contrology develops the body uniformly. Because in doing so, you most efficiently distribute the load of your body in the conditioning, and because you're at the most advantage in terms of moving your load through space, the most uniformly engaged you can be. And that's another way of saying you got to be whole body when you do Pilates. Everybody knows this. I think used to know this. I'm not sure what is known as Pilates anymore. But it's heritage, it's lineage from classical. It's a whole body thing. And to me, I connect that to Joe's paragraph right after he defines his method, to the statement that contrology develops the body uniformly. Know what you know, and recognize, what did I say, understanding the advantage? The advantage of understanding the MMP point of view is that it deals with the facts of bodies in motion. There you go. That's a title for a good email. Bodies in motion. I'll probably get sued by somebody. So I'll put MMP out in front of it. Bodies in motion. It's the recognition of that on a scale of planets and their changes in their movement, in which one finds survival. You either get it or you don't. Right? And it's not a burden on somebody else to not get it. You just don't make it an issue. Hopefully the MMP point of view merely gives you a sense of how anything else you run into compares, and why it might compare or differ or be the same. So I went to Live Can't Live Forever, read between the lines, see behind the curtain, evaluate points of view, and know how special it will be at some point in time for people that really want to go see this point of view and hear this explanation of CT and MMP, that if you have any familiarity with it or have downloaded it to your phone, you can at least fill the demand and provide value for value. And that's where adding 2 and 2 comes in, and direct your thinking. Geist.